Hi, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here for the launch of the Impact at Scale Labs Acceleration to Fluency. We're really excited today to hear from a number of experts about the current status of foundational reading on the continent and some promising opportunities for research and implementation in the coming years. So I will go ahead and pass it off to Izzy Boggild-Jones from the Gates Foundation to let us know a little bit more about the problem we're addressing and why we're all here today. Thanks, Izzy.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, just to say thanks so much, everyone, for joining. I'm really excited to be having this conversation. And thank you for Global Schools Forum for convening this webinar. So I'm just going to set a very brief context for this work. So the Global Education team at the Gates Foundation focuses on improving foundational literacy and numeracy in India and sub-Saharan Africa. And as many of you, probably all of you in this room know very well, we have strong examples of what's worked in improving reading in early grade literacy programs. And we also have a really strong evidence base on the science of reading in low and middle income countries that's well illustrated in the recent GEEP report that Dr. Peggy Dubeck will present on later. So despite these really strong programs, we know that even within the most successful programs, far too few students are reaching fluency benchmarks. And so by fluency, I mean children reading with the accuracy, rate, and expression that they need to effectively comprehend text. So, even at the end of Tusome, one of the best examples of an early grade reading program we have, the vast majority of learners were not at Kiswahili fluency by the end of grade 2. So, why do we care about this? Why does this matter? Well, improving reading outcomes, we care about improving reading outcomes so that students can comprehend and understand what they're reading so that they can, interpret text and be able to use this skill to advance and to live fulfilled lives. So I think, really this fluency piece is a way of us trying to unpick the getting further, faster progress to what we really want to achieve, which is using reading to unlock that progress. So this challenge has really raised a core question. How do we get to fluency for more children more quickly? And what are the most promising evidence-based innovations that can help across instruction, teacher support, materials, and language approaches, and measurement and feedback loops? So I know there are many literacy colleagues in the room who've shaped both my thinking and the foundation's thinking on this agenda. So really thank you for all of your work and for being here today. And I'm really excited that we have such a great panel for you. And yeah, please, I'm looking forward to an active chat and to lots of questions on this work. So thanks so much. And I believe I'm transitioning Sarah to Nangamso if she's been able to join, or perhaps back to you.
I think I will start and then might pass it off to Nangamso in just a moment. So I would like to go ahead and welcome our speakers for today. We have Salome Ong'ele here from the Gates Foundation. We have Ramesh Chandra here from Language and Learning Foundation. And we have Peggy Dubeck, who's here as an independent researcher. So thank you all so much for being here. And before we get started with the questions for today, I'd love if you could just briefly introduce yourself. Salome, maybe we can start with you.
Hello, my name is Salome. Sarah, check for me if I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Salome Ong'ele. I work for Gates Foundation. I'm in charge of literacy program and also the point person for Kenya country. I have worked previously in USAID funded projects and FCDO projects. Here in Kenya, I led Tusome early grade literacy as the chief of party. And I also led the Rwanda Building Learning Foundations as the team lead. And then I led the Ghana Advancing Partnerships for Improved Learning activity, but then later came back to Kenya to lead the Tusome follow-on, which was Kenya Primary Literacy Program. Happy to be here. I've been part of the team that implements and leads large-scale literacy and numeracy programs. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Salome. Over to you, Ramesh.
Hi, Sarah, and everyone. I am Ramesh. I am working as a director academics at Language and Learning Foundation, Delhi. My main role here is to support the state teams or the state academic institutions who are closely working on developing co-creating curriculum, teacher training programs, mentoring programs, and other strategy like assessment and remediation, multi-grade teaching, and all. And I have been here for the last 8 years. Earlier to that, I was in Room to Read, where I worked more than 9 years. And before that, I was in Child Fund India. So my whole journey is on reading and literacy. And recently, a lot of insights we got from interacting with people like you and many other organizations as well. So very excited to listen to you and supporting and connecting them.
Thanks so much, Ramesh. And Peggy?
Hi, everybody. My name is Peggy Dubeck. I'm a literacy researcher that I like to think of myself as my work is at the intersection of child and teacher assessment and classroom assessment and what we do in the classroom with instructional materials. I've been working globally for about 20 years, working both in academia and with implementers, and I'm really committed to getting all kids reading by in an efficient way. I don't know what that age is, 8, 7, 9, depending on but that's what I'm working towards.
Thank you so much. We're going to cover a few different topics related to reading and fluency today and get some different perspectives from these implementers and researchers. And we're going to start with the question around why reading fluency has remained such a persistent problem in Africa specifically, but also globally. And what are some of those challenges at the classroom level and at the system level? So Peggy, we'd love to start with you. In your view, what are some of the assessment and instructional challenges that are driving these persistent problems with reading fluency? Oh, you're on mute.
Great, thanks. So that's a great question. It's my intersection of assessment and instruction. So I love this question. I think I'll start with assessment. I think part of the reason why fluency remains such a persistent challenge, meaning getting kids to become fluent readers, is sometimes how we're interpreting oral reading fluency scores. It's an incredibly useful subtask, and I recommend it all the time. It's sensitive, it's practical, it's really easy to administer. But I think oftentimes we look at the averages or we are hiding how many children are still at really well below where we want them to be. And so we get excited maybe about this growth, but we're not actually looking of saying, hey, was this growth actually meaningful? Was it, even if it's statistically significant, does this actually mean that kids are doing something that actually is a real improvement? And so because of that, on an assessment, I think we're often not really we're not really monitoring what contributes to fluency. So that could be things like oral language, print knowledge, one of my favorites, spelling, or a phonological awareness task. And it's completely understandable, and I talk about this all the time, that some of these will get ceiling effects, and some of these are difficult to measure. So I'm not trying to say that this is, it's an easy fix. But I think we might do better to describe growth on precursor skills too, and then so to help us understand why we're not getting to oral reading fluency. And so I think part of our challenge is definitional and maybe measurement related. So, because that's where we're often starting, is learning what's happening. I think on the instruction side, I think we've done a really great job of talking about the teachers modeling and then doing some guided practice, and then the kids doing independent practice. That we've done a really good job as a field of that's something that's really well known. But I think way too often the practice, what we've often called the you do, is missing. So children really need time to apply what they learn. They need time to read, they need time to spell, and they need time to write. And when the teacher is monitoring and responding to where kids are, without that, kids just can't develop. It's great for the teacher to model, it's great to do it with your friends, but it's really individual child needs to do it. So too often kids are just watching individual other children doing, getting a chance where the teacher monitors, but really what we need all children to get a chance, because when children are watching, it's kind of hiding what their understanding is. So every child needs to be engaged with text, either, with writing and with reading.
Great, thank you so much. And then we'll take one step back to think a little bit more about when you get past the classroom, what are some of the implementation challenges? And Ramesh, I'll hand this over to you. What are some of the implementation issues that are continuing this challenge with fluency?
Yeah, I will put some of the context of India. So India launched its Appland mission in 2021, and there has been a lot of improvement in terms of curriculum. Teachers training are being more consistent, and some of the other aspects like mentoring and supporting through the data, it become a regular part. But still, a recent survey done by LLF, that is called TLPS, Teaching Learning Process Survey, shows that the teaching learning is not happening as per the expectation. So if you teaching learning is not happening as per the expectation, it's quite low. And we found one of the reason is that for the mission, everybody is pushing for results. So a lot of assessment is happening. So people want to know what is the ORF, but they generally don't care. Uh, what already Peggy said, that it's more about average and how kids are. The kids who have good ORF learning better generally takes away a different scenario of the classroom. Uh, we have to focus on the last 25% or the 50% who are not getting to that level. So the whole focus is more on the results that through the mission, and the teaching learning is still a weekend point in the system. So what is not working well, if you see that the decoding is still a loose point, whether the systematic decoding is not taking place. So teachers sometimes doing two things for decoding, and sometimes they are following too many things. So focused stepwise process is not followed much. Another thing is dedicated reading time is not given to the kids. So it is very important to improve the fluency and strengthen the decoding. So uh, we have provided graded text through the government in the states we have been working, but the the implementation of the reading period actually not happening so well. So in most of the cases, it's in the third period. So what happens? Generally, it is more dependent on how kids are taking the books and reading. Teacher is not so effective in providing the actual reading lessons like modeling and then asking children to read, identifying the mistakes. So those things are not happening so well. One of the, I think, cultural problem in India is choral repetition. So what happens? One child stands up and he's reading, other childs are just listening and just repeating the same thing without even looking at the text in their own textbooks or workbooks. And this is a practice that has been done since I think 200, 300 years back. So uh, it's rooted so hard that it's very difficult to get away from this. Even the mission, everyone is focusing on the model reading should be one of the core. Whether if one child is reading, the other child is putting the fingers on the text and understanding what is being read, and they are reading at the same way. So I think and another is like in general the classroom is more didactic, means the teacher is taking most of the time for discussion and managing everything. This is also one of the instructional issue. Two more issues which is not related to the classroom, but overall it's like multi-grade situation. India is facing a huge challenge of multi-grade. So one teacher is teaching 2 and 3 grades. So instruction time to one particular grade is quite low. And since teacher, the whole curriculum is monograde and teacher has to manage two teacher guides at a time, sometimes two workbooks at a time. So it becomes very less effective when teacher is unable to find a solution for multi-grade teaching. And in many of the schools, they have to teach 3 grades. And the another thing is, if you see the teacher professional development, that is not make very much focus on building the technical skill of the teacher. For example, uh, we talk a lot about the importance, we talk a lot about how it happens, but demonstrating, finding out 2, 3 core steps, and then again asking teacher to try and supporting them then when they are also trying in the classroom. So that loop is still so flexible that this is not fixed. I would say that if the 4, 5 steps is dedicated to coding, those steps have been fixed or mastered by the teacher is not in the common consideration. It becomes that, yeah, something has been done in the training, but when the same teacher is trying in the classroom, uh, the same steps is not considered for improvement of the teaching tech. I would say teaching techniques, 4 steps, 3 steps, very crucial for building the mastery.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing in how that next layer of supporting the adults in the system, the teachers, is such a crucial part of understanding this problem. And then to take it out even further, Salome, could you tell us about some of the system level challenges that are contributing to this persistent problem with fluency?
Thank you for having me on this question. Sarah, there are a couple of system level issues that drive challenges with fluency. One of them is teacher workforce and training issues. When we look at our teacher-student ratios in many of our countries in sub-Saharan Africa, they exceed 1 to 60. And even in some classes we visit, you'd find in a classroom there's even 100 plus learners to one teacher. This makes personalized instruction and oral fluency practice nearly impossible in mainstream classrooms. The teachers struggle to make it happen. And it also therefore translates to learners not being able to acquire the fluency rates that they need to. At the same time, inadequate specialized training. We are aware that most of our teacher training colleges don't expose teachers to how foundational learning should be taught. And therefore, the teachers that are out there many a times need in-servicing courses to be able to know how to handle foundational literacy and numeracy so that learners can demonstrate these competencies. This is a real issue. Of late, there's been a system shift to having reliance more on interns or internship. And this internship direction in a couple of our countries make the teachers that are interns just teach for a short time. There's no consistency. And even when their capacities have been built, because they transition quickly out of the workforce, then this affects the learning. But I want us to also look at the policy and curriculum misalignment. One of the big issues that we handle, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is language of instruction. We know that most African countries, if not all, the children are multilinguals. And therefore, systematic failure to effectively manage the transition between native languages and the official language of instruction can leave students struggling to comprehend basic texts, and they would not even be able to reach the level of fluency rates that we would want them to reach, and that would be very beneficial to them. Also, implementation gaps in reforms. Sometimes there are rapid rollouts of new frameworks, and these rollouts often outpace the development of necessary regulatory frameworks and teacher preparedness. One of them that was very good is an example for my Kenyan country when we were rolling out free primary education, but there was no framework in place. So we ended up having so many children in class and teachers were overwhelmed, and there were no proper framework to support the teachers to deliver teaching and learning that can enhance and support learners to acquire the necessary fluencies that they need. And that speaks to also fragmented research ecosystems that are happening across different countries. Progress is often hindered by fragmented research on what strategies actually work. You'd find that in one country, a couple of studies are going on, but the governments are not able to really put a finger on what exactly works, because from this quarter, this other study is going on, and from another quarter, another study is being released. And therefore, there's no systematic way for the government, or the governments have not come in together to really agree on what really works on the ground and how to roll what works. So a confusion exists just from fragmented research ecosystems. Inadequate data, or sometimes no real data, or weak monitoring of students' fluency rates is at play. For example, we don't have many countries that can receive data, real-time data on how fluent the learners are, so that they be able to use this data to make the next decisions on how to support the learners to acquire the requisite fluencies that they need to acquire, either in numeracy or in literacy. And there are also structural and financial resources gaps. Infrastructure deficits exist. For example, we have many schools where they don't even have a system of books, libraries where to keep books, so that every child can have a course book in their hand to help the child and facilitate the child to improve on learning. That would, of course, improve the fluency rates of the learners. But where such happens, and in many of our rural schools in our sub-Saharan African countries, it becomes very difficult because of lack of this basic physical infrastructure, and as well as where ICT facilities are needed to support literacy and digital fluency. Electricity doesn't exist, and therefore these learners are left behind and cannot improve. Related to this is also material inadequacy. There's systematic delays in distributing learning materials, and sometimes we even have schools that don't even receive these teaching and learning materials that have already been developed and availed. And I would confidently give an example of Ethiopia, where some contexts don't allow certain schools to receive any teaching and learning materials. And of course, this is also related to situations of conflict at times that we go through in some of our countries. I would finally say that one of the major reasons also is related to governance and socioeconomic inequalities. The digital divide, where I've already mentioned how infrastructure affects, but this is also related to governance. The government system sometimes leaves some regions behind, and these regions are perpetually behind. And so they are behind in terms of infrastructure, they are behind in terms of government services, they are behind in terms of posting teachers and assigning teachers to them. They are basically behind on everything. And every country has their own their own socioeconomic inequality, and most of them are on the north. If you see what happens on the north of every country, most of the African countries, sub-Saharan African countries, you'd see the inequalities that I'm talking about. So basically, those are the main issues that have been systematic issues that have been affecting acquisition of fluency, or the challenges that go with fluency for our learners. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much for outlining all of these different layers of factors that are contributing to this problem, starting with things that are happening in the classroom, looking at how we're supporting teachers, and also bigger system issues around funding and materials distribution and policies and curriculum. Next, we'll move into some promising practices that have the potential to address some of these challenges. So I'll turn it over to my colleague Nangamso to lead the discussion about that.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So now that we've obviously heard a lot about what are some of the challenges that persist around getting more kids reaching their grade level or reading fluency benchmark, I'm going to turn to Peggy to really pin down in understanding what we know, what research is out there, and what implementation programs are out there that particularly focuses on instructional practices. And what instructional practices do you think have the most promise for accelerating reading fluency? I mean, we've seen a lot of these reading programs that have these high effect sizes, but when you start digging really deep into the data, you see that many kids still do struggle reading their grade level. So tell us about what you think are some of those promising instructional practices around accelerating reading fluency.
Terrific. Okay, so I want to go back to what I said in my first question, that I think kids need more opportunities to actually read and to write and not watch somebody else to do it. And also just recognizing all the points that Salome just mentioned about supply chains and getting access to books, as I know this is a real issue. But so I want to start off with something that doesn't require a lot of materials, and that's we need to have kids doing more writing. There's very little writing happening. And the real benefit of writing is it's highly structurally transparent. When a teacher sees what a child does on paper, they're producing the text, and your teacher's able to say, this is what I can tell the child needs for phonics instruction, which is going to contribute to the word accuracy, which is going to ultimately contribute to kids becoming more fluent readers. And then also we can see how they're expressing their ideas in writing, if that's what the writing activity is doing. So I don't think writing should be occasional. Often when I go into classrooms, I will open up children's little books like this. And you can't see it because I'm in the shade, or not the shade, the faded, whatever it's called. And you'll see that it's been, 3 weeks since the kid wrote previously. And this is not between breaks. This is not when, this is when school was happening the last 3 weeks, and there's only writing every few weeks. Writing should not be occasional. It should be really expected every single day. I know it's difficult to get a 6 and a 7-year-old to get the pencil out, but if it's something becomes a routine, then the work that it takes at the beginning of the year for kids to know the processes of writing will benefit. Also, we also need to be having kids interacting with more text. So when we are producing text, we need to have children having more opportunities to see something novel, something new. If they're in a learner book that only has a limited set of words, when they're working on phonics instruction, or if they're working on just word reading or any activity in the book, they can memorize what's there. And fluency develops when kids repeatedly apply the code to new words and to connected text. So I would like to think that decodable text and storybooks shouldn't be considered supplemental. And I'd also like to just make the case here for really engaging read alouds. When children, the first couple of years of schooling, much of that instructional time is rightly focused on getting kids to be accurate on what the text that they're reading. And oftentimes that text is quite simple, but read alouds are a way that a teacher can take the children beyond what their own reading ability is, and they can do that through building knowledge, and they can also build comprehension skills that they can later be using once they're moving a little bit beyond decoding. So, so really more broadly, I would say that we need to have more time for foundational literacy skills. I propose that systems would actually have children reach certain thresholds before we start introducing a lot of new subjects. I think foundational literacy and foundational numeracy should really be taking up more of the instructional time in the school day.
Thanks, Peggy. Very interesting one on the writing piece. Often there's such strong focus on literacy programs to focus on just on reading, and often either very limited connection to the reading and writing focus. So I think that is a really, really good point. I'm going to turn to Ramesh now. Still sticking to the topic of promising instructional practices. So, what classroom instructional practice do you prepare teachers to use in your professional development courses? I know that LLF has a range of these courses, and what practices do you encourage government to prioritize in these solutions? So, kind of seeing how do you connect the in classroom practices to the training development so that there is quite strong alignment to then what are some of those that you would suggest that we should be prioritizing?
Yeah, so in general, the all the courses for professional development is a bit of comprehensive. So many things are there. So we want to encourage and get teachers understand what are the all good practices that should happen in the classroom. But when it comes to the teacher professional development on a particular instruction design or particular province or a state, then we become very focused. We generally prioritize the all the strategies and activities which are suitable to that state and according to the instruction time the state is getting, according to the support structure the state has. So, in general, overall, I think in alignment with Peggy, she already detailed out what are the core practices. We focus more on oral rich talk, which includes read aloud, discussion on pictures, some ACL activities, and also a lot of conversations around children's life. And we during this process, our focus is also on open-ended questions for higher order thinking, and so we encourage children to respond in sentences, uh, not just yes, no, or word. Many research has proven that listening and talking makes children having a strong phonological processing, which is required when you are dealing with the text, when you're reading, when you are having your fluency for understanding as well. So the focus is on that. Since India is also a multilingual country, it becomes very important for children to get a lot of exposure on oral level. So this also reinforce the idea that children should be given the proper oral exposure before they are coming to decoding and for the reading comprehension and fluency. Second is focusing more on systematic decoding. A lot of practice should be given to kids. The Indian scripts are different, so the we know that the literacy is dependent on the nature of the orthography. So a certain orthography need a lot of practice because of the number of symbols they have, and the same is with the Indian languages. And another is we want to fix a daily reading time, dedicated reading time with graded text and some genuine children's literature graded for the younger kids. And I think this is a challenge, but we focus on that. It is one of the indicator that we always observe when we are observing the classroom. And then the integration of writing with reading in a very meaningful way. It is also one of the core area. And the last one is regular assessment and revision. And this is very important because when you assess too late, you miss the bus. So we have a weekly assessment system where on the end of the last week of the day, we assess and divide the kids in two groups. And then the group one, which needs teacher support, is given a remedial instruction, differentiated instruction for the next 5 days of the week. Next 5 days is not exclusively for remediation, but sometime on every day, 20 minutes, 15 minutes on each day on the next 5 days. The idea is that if you teach systematically, your assessment, revision, and remediation should also aligned with that. So as well as all the kind of messaging information that we give to the government at the largest. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you were breaking a bit there, but I think you're back now. So perhaps if you just want to finish the last two sentences. Ramesh?
Okay, the last one was regular assessment and revision. Am I audible?
Yes, you
Yeah.
are. Yes, you
So
are. You're great.
assessment and revision is core for ensuring that there is a scope for equity in the classroom. So there is a weekly assessment system. Based on that, teacher takes the differentiated instruction and focusing on the kids who are lagging behind. It's integrated interwoven in the instruction design itself. There is nothing beyond the instruction design. So regular assessment followed with differentiated instruction. And we feel that in countries like India, where the absenteeism is a big problem, only 60-65% kids are coming on a particular day. It is very important to have a very short intervals of assessment and some very specific differentiated instruction. A lot of practice is needed, and also due to the orthographic nature of the languages that we are dealing in India.
Sure. Sure. Thank you so much, Ramesh. I mean, I think some of your points around our language development and questioning just reminds me of a paper that I'm currently working on that looks at like our language discourse in classrooms across rural South Africa. And what we found is that, it's still centered around teacher talk and teachers asking relatively low level, low order types of questions. But I think some of those points that you've raised are indeed some of the things that we see in terms of practices. Now we'll turn around. I think earlier on, Salome mentioned around typically in sub-Saharan Africa, kids speak more than one languages, multilingual context or bilingual context, and very often kids are being taught in a language that is not their mother tongue or kind of like the L1, for example. So it's also very important to bear this in mind when kids are being taught how to read in an unfamiliar language. So Salome, I'm going to come back to you, seeing that you've raised this point earlier on around multilingual contexts. And I'm going to probably just ask so that we can make sure we finish our program, brief response around what are some of the opportunities around multilingual environments, and how may we perhaps create some of these opportunities for young readers in these multilingual contexts specifically.
Thank you very much. There are a couple of many opportunities that multilingual environments create for young readers. And These readers often develop a more conscious understanding of how language works as a system. And this helps them analyze grammar and syntax more effectively in all their languages. This is what we call metalinguistic awareness. Theirs become higher because of the way they are exposed to more than one language at the same time as they grow up and as they learn language. But at the same time, navigating multiple linguistic systems trains the brain to switch tasks and focus more effectively. This is a benefit often referred to as improved executive function. And therefore, they get enhanced cognitive flexibility. And at the same time, I would say exposure to diverse sound systems is known to give multilingual readers a natural advantage in identifying and manipulating sounds, aiding early decoding skills. So in the long run, these learners get heightened phonological awareness. And lastly, I would say they have broader cultural perspective because multilingual environments allow readers to connect text to varied cultural contexts, fostering deeper empathy, open-mindedness, and socio-emotional growth. And therefore, we see that multilingual is something children that grow and learn under multilingual context have such advantages that we don't want to ignore as we support them to learn to read. Thank you.
Thanks, Salome. So what I'm hearing from you is to move away from multilingual context deficit narrative. Very often we hear that a lot in program designers. So, there's multiple languages in these contexts. It's so difficult, it's challenging, and all the sorts of things. So what I'm hearing from you that actually there's a lot of opportunities here. More than anything, it probably these learners or children that come from multilingual contexts, if used well, and instruction is targeted well, could be to their advantage. Peggy, very quickly, what are some of the challenges faced by young readers and their teachers then in these multilingual environments?
I want to build a little bit on what Salome was saying because
Sure.
I think we often don't frame multilingualism as an asset. Children have funds of knowledge that they from across languages. They might know household objects in one language. Play happens maybe in the lingua franca, and academic vocabulary may sit in the language of instruction. And a challenge that we have, that children have, is we sometimes think of those domains as those domains should be thought of resources and not deficits, that we should be thinking about what they know broadly. I think one thing that would really help teachers a lot is they would benefit from more support in navigating the cross-linguistic transfer. Again, building a little bit on what Salome was saying. So, for example, I'll give a very specific example. If a teacher, or not, sorry, not a teacher, if a child gives a sound of a letter in another language, that's not just an error. That's really evidence of knowledge, and that can be a starting point for feedback rather than something to shut down. And I know teachers are open to this, and we talk about this globally, that teachers' linguistic knowledge need to be expanded so they can look at kids' errors as a starting point or as a starting teaching point. And so if they can say, I see what you did here, you brought in your first language, and now let's work with that. And I think if we could have more of that as a part of our training, I think it'll also empower teachers to have them feel stronger at the school that they're experts in some ways. And so I'll stop there. I know we're tight.
Thanks, Peggy. Thank you. So I see a lot of thumbs up to your responses. So this seems to be an interesting thematic theme around reading fluency around these multilingual contexts. So I'll probably give you one more minute if you would like to expand and not cut you. You good? Okay. Okay, thanks. Now to the very last part of our panel, really focuses on moving from pilot to scale. Very often, these programs kind of follow a life cycle proof of concept to more on your middle-sized demonstration to then scaling at large. And we know that NLF is one of the organizations in India that's working at scale and working very closely with government. So, Ramesh, I'm going to ask you to come in here and just share with us how do LLF's district demonstration programs and the system strengthening programs that you guys are involved in work together to create system change at scale. Because very often programs do very well when they are working in 150 schools, 250 schools. It is always the last mile. We call it the last mile when it has to be really kind of gradually released, handed over to government, or government should be implementing and running with the programs. That's always, always, always the challenge and the most difficult part around scaling programs.
Yeah, it's a great question. Initially, when we had a pilot for proof of concept, later on, all our demonstration program is mainly focusing uh, to have a loop from learning from the field to scaling up at the state level. State in India means provinces. Demonstration programs where the curriculum is followed, the state level curriculum is followed, but we give some enhancement at the district level by improving the capacity of mentors, by increasing the number of days of trainings, providing some additional inputs to the district administration so that they can manage the program effectively at the district level, as well as our field people also visit school and collect information data and provide on-site support to the teachers along with the government counterparts. And at the end of every year, we collect evidences from the field and develop a report to share with the government. And the learning, the challenges, everything is there. And based on that, we convince government to take a stronger corrective decisions to make the program impactful at the school and ground level. This is the loop that have been followed, and there are many challenges as well because not every time you collect got some insights from the field, you have some data from the field, and government would just ready to uh, take action on that. Sometimes it is okay for them to, yeah, they understand that these are the problems and they also quote that this is a large scale, so this problem will persist. But at many occasions, regarding the improvement in the teachers' training, regarding capacity building of the mentors, regarding the improvement in the curriculum, they have agreed and aligned with us. And that has been very effective in terms of making the program improved and effective at the ground level. So this loop is being followed. At the same time, we also understand that we need to have a dedicated studies to at least vertically understand what is the core issue or problem in the field. So we also conduct some studies, research on specific components like multi-grade remediation is not happening. Sometimes the third period, which includes a lot of reading time for kids, is not. So we also conduct
Hi, Ramesh.
studies.
I think you. Hi, Ramesh. Your line. I don't know if you can
On
hear me, but your line is a little bit unstable. But I think we are you back so that we can wrap up and move towards Salome? Hi there.
Hello, am I
Yes.
audible?
Yes, now you are audible. Just wanted to find out if you're okay to wrap up, and then we move to Salome for the last question of the panel.
Sorry for the disturbance. So, the last point is that all the data and evidences that we collect from the field are useful for scaling up of the program, and something the good practices that we are getting, how much is this can be converted into larger scale programs. So that loop is very open and very flexible, happening every 6 months, 1 year. And we also conduct specific research studies to inform these kind of challenges to the government. So recently, we have done a multi-grade strategy, which is still on. And because the teacher are facing a lot of problem, the monograde curriculum, and the expectation is that the grades, the both or 2 or 3 grades curriculum can be managed by one teacher. So we conducted studies, we tried something, some good results also happening. So there are two parts. One is regular data-based, some kinds of insights are being shared with the government for the regular improvement. Another is to do a vertical deep dive into particular issues which is causing a problem in the field.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Ramesh. So you've mentioned quite a lot of interesting insights, and particularly around supporting the middle tier, so additional support that LLF provides around data collection, some research studies that informs some priorities, or at least opens up discussions with government partnerships or partners around what are some of the key areas, challenges. And this middle tier one, or providing coaches, is a real challenge. I mean, in most cases, these folks are allocated a large number of schools. In the South African context, you get one subject advisor overseeing roughly about 100 schools. They barely visit schools. And when they do, often it's just like compliance, tick size, tick, kind of role, and not really zooming in and focusing on supporting teachers' instructional practices as well. So there's many, I think, both promising around how to support or kind of shift from kind of pilot to scale. And the last question, I think, will be with Salome around, in particularly the features of the literacy program that is scalable, right? What are some of the things, or how might this differ across different contexts? What are the key things that you think are very important when you're scaling a program and scaling it particularly through government? Yeah. Salome?
Thank you, Nangamso. Thank you very much. A couple of things that make a program scalable through the government. One, very important, is the program should be cost effective. A program, this literacy program, should be able to be something that the governments can manage the costs and can sustain the costs. And this should actually start during the design period, as the program is designed jointly with the government so that they also see and they become part of it. But for this literacy program to work, government should be able to take it up. For example, each child having a book, teachers having their guides, but they should be cost effective. What kind of books are these? If they are cost books, what are the costs per book? How can we make this affordable for the government to keep running with it, even beyond the period of project? Secondly, the literacy program should be integrated with existing systems. Rather than creating parallel structures, for this to be scalable, it's important to use existing government hierarchies, such as the district officers or the county officers, the section heads. Let the programs be designed in such a way that those who will implement it are really those who are government officials. So by the time the project is transitioning, they've been used to implementing it, and they may possibly continue implementing it. Thirdly, data-driven and accountability. When the government sees that the programs are successful in getting them real-time data that they can use for monitoring what's happening, and this also require some digitization so that the government can track teacher attendance, they can track lesson completion, they can track student progress, they can track a couple of things that they really care about. Then they would be very happy to continue doing such programs, and they would be happy to put their budget into such programs, because those literacy programs that are designed and are data driven to be data driven and bringing accountability is actually meeting the governments at their core needs. But I want to mention two other things, actually around three things that are very critical to literacy programs and that are scalable to the governments, but mean a lot for implementation of literacy and ensuring that learners acquire the core competencies that they need to acquire. We talked a lot about multilingual, mother tongue, L1, first language. So let our programming and planning respond to the context and the environment, and see these languages positively and integrate them on our programming, because the governments are aware that these languages exist and that children's L1 language, their first language are this, and they have many other languages that they interact with. Secondly, teacher guides. When teachers, like structured teacher guides coupled with coaching the teachers. These are very, very important to delivering successful literacy programs. And when such are in place and governments interact with them, they can easily scale them up, because the government would be seeing the benefits of such programs in improving literacy competencies for the children that they care about. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Salome. I mean, the procurement and the budget and the costing one is always one with a lot of attention. Guys, we know government budgets are not increasing, and in fact, we've seen a decrease in funding in global education, and really seriously thinking ahead around your cost per unit and understanding budget decision making within ministries is super very critical. The second point that you've mentioned, Salome, around designing for government integration from the beginning, I think is such an important a point here. We often design and implement your roles programs, where we throw creating parallel systems. And very often when you integrate these programs, it gets quite difficult to sustain them within government systems. So rather thinking more about your Toyota versions of programs. So yeah, some interesting points there from Sarah. I want to encourage folks, because of timing, put your questions in the chat. And we're going to give perhaps about, Peggy, I'm putting you on the spot, 5 minutes. And while Peggy is just reflecting on the latest GEEP report, put your question on the chat, and we will then kind of spend some time going through the questions on the chat, and it would be useful to also be specific of who you're directing to. So, Peggy, last year, October, there was a recent GEEP report. Interesting focus, more like looking at previous GEEP reports. This one really zoomed into instructional practices or reading literacy particularly. So, will you share some of the highlights of the GEEP report and how the report can provide some foundation around thinking about our reading fluency and some innovations to consider?
Yeah, great. Thanks. You're doing a great job of facilitating. I feel like I'm just jumping out of the room with all your great connections. I've given a talk on this paper multiple times in the last few months, and some of you I know have been on there. So today I'm just going to give you some highlights and my goal is to describe the paper and some of its findings. So maybe you'll use it in your work. Next. Here's a fact that we all know. Too many kids aren't learning to read, and with even higher rates in sub-Saharan Africa. Next. And we have had our goal back when we started was thinking is there's been a lot of investment in reading programs, but there was concern of does the evidence from high income countries apply elsewhere? Next. So the Global Education Advisory Panel, the GEAP, is shown here, decided to explore the evidence for reading instruction. Next. And different, as was just said, different from their previous products, this paper was authored externally and then formally endorsed after multiple rounds of review by the panel. Next. So until this report, as probably most of the people on this call know, the really influential evidence guiding literacy program has come from a handful of high-income countries, such as the US National Reading Panel and the Rose Report from the UK. And what this report does is we expand the evidence to low and middle income countries. We cite 151 studies from a diverse geography, shown here on the left with the green, and the type of studies of the report are shown on the right in yellow. Next. So what we do is we're spanning about 167 languages, both alphabetic and alphasyllabary, and we compare that evidence back to, we take the evidence from low and middle income countries and then compare it back to high. And next. And so the paper is organized for multiple uses. Wouldn't expect someone to just sit down and read this under a tree for your afternoon reading for pleasure. We have an executive summary that stands alone. Section 1 really presents the evidence base for science of reading and contrasts it to other approaches. Section 2 is the core of the report, focusing on instruction. Section 3 describes contextual factors that really influence implementation. And then we have annexes that, the annexes have the references, and the whole design is very accessible. So I think it makes it really easy to use. And it's currently available in 6 languages. So I'm going to really not spend too much time on these next few slides, but basically what I argue is that humans are new to reading and that it's not a natural process as much as languages. And so that's why instruction needs to happen. We talk a little bit about the simple view. You can go next again. And the paper is set up around these 6 skills. There's a section on each of these. So that's section 2 of the report that I described earlier. Next. We take a really strong stance that oral language is really important, and we talk about how it can be developed. And there we go. What I talked about earlier, there's a little read aloud. So you can go to the next. We talk about phonological awareness, and I think it's really important for people to realize that even if your language is not an alphabetic language, you still are working with phonological awareness. And we talk about that quite a bit. You can go to the next. And we talk also about, we make the connections between phonics and phonological awareness. And we talk about without phonics, some children are not expected, or they're going to end up just memorizing words. And this slide actually has a bunch of little clicks on it. So if you can just click, 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 okay, thanks. So what we are arguing in the paper is that phonics is central to effective instruction, but it's not sufficient on its own. And that's really, really important. And next. And we talk about reading fluency. And this is really, if you really want to talk to people about how reading develops, reading fluency is a really great way to talk about it with them, because you first are reading accurately, then your reading rate, and then your reading expression, which signals that the reader is reading with monitoring their meaning. And all of these can be taught, and all of these can be taught in engaging ways like these girls here. Next. Okay, here's my favorite. I'm loving getting to talk a lot about writing, because we have a whole section in this paper on writing, and we talk about having a reciprocal relationship to reading and how spelling supports phonics and writing for ideas supports comprehension. And just this little Spanish example here, depending on if a child added a comma or a verb, it totally changes the meaning, and it's such a great interaction point between child and teacher. Next. And finally, we talk about the goal of all of this is reading comprehension, the purpose of reading. And what we argue in the paper is that we need teachers to develop strategies, but kids also need to develop knowledge, and that knowledge is going to happen through experiences and through wide reading. And so we're not just talking about strategies in this paper. Next. Okay, so then we talk about structured pedagogy. We heard today how important it is, but we really try to emphasize that structured pedagogy on its own is not enough. Like we have the three aspects here of the three pieces that structured pedagogy has, but it also needs to include those 6 skills that we're talking about. All 4 of those need to be working together. And we move on to we talk about how there's a policy and investment case for this to be happening. So there's a little bit on cost effectiveness, and this can be done. And you can go to the next slide. And so the science is clear, the path is known, alignment ensures children learn to read. And last slide, I identify some ways that you can use the report. You can use it to benchmark programs. You can use it to inform curriculum. You can use it to justify money spending. You can use it to compare programs, look at gaps, and guide research. There's still a lot more things that we need to learn from very specific languages and places. So that's just a big high-level overview. I think there's actually a recording out there somewhere of the whole panel and getting to do some of the interactive activities. So thanks.
Thanks, Peggy. And just to be slightly cheeky there, so if you look at kind of the history of these JEEP reports, what was the rationale to zoom into particularly reading instruction this time? Or there isn't. It was kind of like,
Yeah, well, yeah, sorry, I went so fast, but because just not enough kids are learning to read, and the GEEP had recommended, they had done their Smart Buys report saying,
yeah.
hey, this makes a lot of sense when you spend money, in these ways, but they still knew that within those, what they looked at in Smart Buys is there was people spending money on some of those things that weren't working. So what are the ingredients? You can have, well, I'll just make up this metaphor, but you can have a good cake, and why is some cake really tasty and some not so tasty? So yeah, that's
Cool. Thank you so much, Peggy. I mean, this report, particularly for those that are looking at program literacy design, I find it to be quite useful. It gives a lot of some of the things to kind of focus on, and particularly when it comes to teacher training and instructional practice shift. So I've shared the link in the chat for those that haven't seen it. It's most recently become my little Bible that I refer back to often with these things. Okay, so now we're gonna probably spend roughly about 10 minutes on questions. Thanks. I see people have been posting their questions on the chat, so keep posting, guys. And I'm just gonna work, for the ease of time, just kind of work my way through the questions that are on the chat. And the first one is from Henry. And this one's for you, Salome. Henry asks, he says, I have an opportunity to flag literacy initiatives for use at home. I can push these out for free to a few million homes in Kenya. Can you recommend some programs or interventions that Kenyan parents can access? And probably also to add, what were the kind of the key components or features of these at-home programs that were successful in the Kenyan context? You can, I'll just ask and then we can respond immediately after while I scroll through some of the questions. I see Salome is getting ready to answer that question there.
So Nangamso, you want me to respond immediately?
Yes, please. Yes, please. As I scroll through the questions.
A quick one. The Ministry of Education through Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development has rolled out parental guidelines on supporting learners. And so the role of having parents participate actively in the learning of their children is something that Kenya government cares about. So these resources that you have, please, you can find a way of discussing how to bring them for use in Kenya, and that is not something we may be able to do in this forum. So we may want to engage probably beyond this forum so that we brainstorm on how best this can help the Kenya children to learn. That's what I would say for now, because it's really not, for the time we have here will fail us. But I really want to thank you for saying that you already have some resources there and you're thinking and considering of their use in Kenya. So it's possible to find a space for them. And just for your information, the Minister of Education in Kenya is going to launch the literacy foundational learning guidelines for the country by end of this month. So end of this month, they'll do a huge launch. And on that draft guidelines, which I'm aware of, there are roles of parents and resources needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Salome. So, Henry, there you go. You've got an invitation directly for Salome to engage with her further on some of these some of your interventions. I'll pass the next one to Ramesh. It's around EdTech, which I think Salome touched on it briefly earlier on. Ramesh, this one's for you, and maybe if you maybe to save bandwidth, also feel free to switch off your video as well. So, in the context, and this one's from Kami, in which context have digital solutions been helpful to scaling literacy interventions in low and middle income countries in particularly? And perhaps what is the role you see of tech playing over the next 3 to 5 years around improving instructional practices, particularly?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because a lot of role of AI is being visualized in the literacy and numeracy. So, uh, we have, as an organization, we are aligned on the use and maximizing uh, the impact that can be created by AI or tech. And in India and other countries as well, there are organizations and governments who have been working to integrate AI or EdTech in the system. But at a larger level, our stand is, particularly LLF's stand is, child-facing content or child-facing approach will not be that effective for young learners. So anything that can help teacher, uh, maybe use of assessment data, lesson plan, using lesson plan, using the techniques, videos and all for their capacity building, short bite-sized, uh, any content that can be seen on the mobile and all. So we are more interested to get it for teachers, mentors, and the or administrative layer that is dealing with this issue. But for child facing, we are still not so sure. There are organizations who have done good work, but we are not confident that that will be too good for long-term sustenance. And regarding what will happen in the future, so something it's very quick. It looks that it can help in a quicker way, in a easier way, simpler way, and we do feel that there is a merit to do it for the kids who are not able to learn with the proper method uh, and who are struggling, having difficulties on on particular specific front. It can be used effectively for them. We had tried something for ORF, testing ORF, whether the child is making mistakes, pause, uh, even the flow, the kind of mistakes, the color. So all these analysis can be done, but for a regular intervention, regular instruction, we do feel that it should be limited and should not take away the mainstream educational intervention from the teachers.
Thanks, Ramesh. I was scrolling in the chat, and I think this one I'll pose to Peggy because I think it's what you often see in programs. In many cases, the books look great, training content seems sound, but the biggest issue, you go into the classroom and teachers are not implementing uh, the program effectively or deploying effective teaching practices. So this one's from Rajita. She says, while implementing these programs, we often notice that teachers are unable to translate their learnings from training programs to the classroom. Very often you see buffet style. Teachers pick what they want to implement from your program. This is not always a motivational issue. It may also be that they are overburdened with administrative work, or sometimes they are single school teachers and a whole lot of other contexts that could be as a result of low implementation. So she's asking, bearing this in mind, uh, what can we do to help teachers implement effective teaching practices, regardless of the above issues, for successful modifying their programs or their teaching skills and improve FLN skills amongst children? What are some of the low-hanging fruits, Peggy? Like if teachers can probably just do 5 good things very well. Because often we ask teachers to do 40 things at once in programs, which I also find quite problematic, that we put so much on teachers at a time rather than taking a scaffolding approach.
Yeah, I'll use your buffet metaphor. Let's have a smaller table with less food at the buffet. And have whenever there is a training, whatever that training is, if it's in person, if it's virtual, teachers are actually practicing the item and actually getting feedback on, when I mean the item, I mean the activity. So just like I was advocating earlier that we want to have children moving away from just watching the teachers, we want to move. It's great when an instructor at a training models. That's great, but that should be a small part of the time. The majority of the time should be the teachers practicing. I think I sometimes like to have teachers in a triad where there's one teacher pretending to be the teacher and one child pretending to be the child. I know this is not a real situation. And then you have a third teacher watching and following along on the script to see, like, how's it going? How is the teacher pretending to be the teacher? What is she doing and how is she responding? And they rotate through those roles. And so if they come to the training and practice the activities, they are going to feel a little bit more comfortable to try those when they go to their classroom. I think that's one very practical thing that I'm not saying it's going to fix it all, but that a smaller buffet and lots more time for teachers to actually practice the activities that you want them to do.
Thanks, Peggy. This actually reminds me of the science of teaching. They one of their how-to guides really zoomed into teacher training, and there's a very nice pie chart that they say, if your training is not designed, 50% must be practice. So teachers actually sitting in the training, practicing and on the floor and doing all the activities. About a good chunk, about 30 to 30%, up to 20% should be modeling. So they are seeing someone model how these lessons and activities are done, and very few discussions and very, very, very few lecture type training. Often I've been into trainings, it feels often much like a lecture where the facilitator is doing 100% of the talking. So yeah, thanks for that. So folks, we on our last 6 minutes of this very interesting webinar addressing some very critical, important topics, at least for us that work in literacy and reading programs. Really understanding what are some of the challenges around reading fluency, and what are some of the promising interventions or promising practices to consider. And I think a very important part around how do we shift from pilot programs into scaling through government. So there was quite a few things that was highlighted very quickly. Is Peggy reminded us over and over again around teachers need to spend more time on learners doing reading. More time spent on reading. Salome spoke about teacher guides and books. I love metaphor of, you cannot play soccer without a soccer ball. That reminded me of that. Ramesh spoke a lot about developing our own language in classrooms and also through questioning strategies, and questioning and asking a variety of questions, right? Just not your yes, no questions that assess variety of skills. He also mentioned regular assessments as a critical piece around some of these promising practices. We touched on our multilingual context. I see that one was, we probably need to just have a separate conversation around multilingual context instructions as well. And the very last a piece around data and data accountability and integrating in government systems. So to our panelists and Izzy for sharing and framing this work at GSF that we care about. We will be also using this event to kind of share and open or launch our most recent impact at scale that's called Acceleration to Fluency. We are going to open a call for organizations that are considering or wanting to apply for innovations around accelerating our reading fluency. A lot of some of this conversations that we were having today is built on that. So almost thinking about the GEEP report as research. This particular call in itself is the practice. So we want to really kind of marry the research and practice and find some of these innovations. And what we mean by innovations, almost moving beyond the great buys. So what about, for example, writing, phonics instruction, reading instructions, writing. We heard it all today. So I'm going to ask my colleague to drop down the link onto this call. It's opened for, I think, for 3 weeks. We're having the expression of interest. We're looking at particularly sub-Saharan Africa countries within the application itself. We've listed the countries of prioritizations and of course, if there's a really strong and compelling research and innovation outside of those contexts, we would consider that, but we have some priority countries in particularly. So I think this is a problem like Peggy framed for us earlier on, that we know that our reading fluency is a strong indicator of reading comprehension, and we need to get kids accelerated. Most kids, a whole bunch of kids, much more faster. And to date, we haven't really seen some of these in these middle to large scale programs. So we're very excited about this new initiative of Global Schools Forum and the partnership with the Gates Foundation. So I'm going to just double check. Yes, my colleagues is dropping. Sarah is dropping all the links that are on there. Just to note, folks, that we will have a webinar specifically as a briefing to the specific call in itself. But just to kind of say that, we're excited for folks to show interest, and it's really building up on some of the existing work. So with that said, thank you to Izzy again, Peggy, Ramesh, Salome, for your interesting insights. And I hope it's given some people, the folks on the call that are considering to apply, some food for thought and some insights around what are some of the promising innovations and what are some of the key things to look out when designing programs for scale. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good afternoon, evening, or good morning, depending on which part of the world you're dialing in today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.